We in Toronto, or more accurately Toronto's suburbs, are making a massive mistake. And it's not one that's unique to Toronto. Abandoning a 50+ kilometer urban rail line in 2022 should be unthinkable. However, this is a real problem that cities around the world face, and today I'm going to tell you why. OBRY, or the Orangeville-Brampton Railway, is a 55-kilometer railway corridor that connects western Mississauga, the suburb/second city to the west of Toronto, to the town of Orangeville, north of Mississauga, passing through Brampton, a fast-growing city. Mississauga and Brampton are among the fastest-growing cities, not just in Canada, but in North America. Now, the line has been abandoned, and the blame for this can be placed on Orangeville, Brampton, Mississauga, Peel Region, Metrolinx, and the Government of Ontario. What this means is that this corridor, from western Mississauga up through Brampton and up to Orangeville, has ceased to be a rail corridor in all official senses. Parts of it will be broken off and sold as one-time real estate deals. Parts of it might be turned into a linear park or a greenway. But at the end of the day, reactivating a rail corridor for passenger or other uses becomes a lot harder when it means punching through people's houses or through new parks. The unfortunate reality is that in North America, and in much of the world, the policy and regulations around short-line railways are not on the side of reason. Urban rail corridors, usually initially designed for freight and industrial use, are seen as a way to make a quick buck selling them off for development, probably single-family homes if it's in North America, and unloading some costs that otherwise regions and municipalities have to pay for. Now you might be asking,
isn't this just rail fan fanaticism? Do old industrial and freight rail corridors really make any sense for passenger transit use?
Well, the channel is RM Transit, so you know the answer. Across the world, as cities develop, for better or for worse, they often de-industrialize. And that doesn't just mean that old industrial rail lines might get abandoned, but it means that large old industrial sites are often also shut down. You'd be surprised how much those two are connected, since industrial rail lines are one of the best ways to get materials to industrial sites in a cost-effective way. As less and less customers are available, prices go up on operating the rail line, and other customers are inevitably pushed out as well. That said, many industrial sites, which are often well served by utilities, electricity and water are often in high demand in large industries, can often be redeveloped into major new high-density developments. A great example of this is the Docklands area in London. Of course, western Mississauga is not the Docklands, but the thing is, reactivating a rail corridor can be incredibly cheap, so you really don't need a Docklands-level development for it to make sense. Having an open rail corridor you can develop on makes setting up a basic rail service incredibly simple and surprisingly cost-effective. The original O-Train project in Ottawa, which is honestly miraculous kind of even on a global sense, like it's low cost even if you were to look at it in Europe, was set up for far less than a single subway station costs these days, at least in Toronto, and offered 15-minute frequencies all day, modern European-style trains, and just an overall great transit experience. And that wouldn't have been possible if there wasn't a rail line already there that could be used. Of course, the Docklands also benefited from this. A large portion of the DLR, which I talked about in my DLR Explained video up here, was built using existing rail corridors, not to mention other railways in the Docklands area. The crazy part about all of this is that the government in Toronto and its surroundings openly recognizes how desperately we need transit. And a lot of people, though sadly not the government it seems, have put two and two together and realized that part of why everything costs so much is because we abandon old corridors and build everything deep underground in tunnels. Our original solution to this problem, that things were getting really expensive, was to compromise on quality, building trams down major arterials that could easily justify heavier means of transit. If we had kept more rail corridors around, then we might have had a lot more compelling options. And in fact, in many cases, we had more compelling options and still chose to bury stuff. Of course, part of using rail corridors in new projects is recognizing their value and preserving them, but also planning on a city level for development around rail corridors that matches their future potential passenger movement capacity. You can move an astonishing number of people on a mainline railway corridor, far more than even a pretty substantial metro line. Now, when approached, Metrolinx said projects around OBRY aren't really on their roadmap, because they admittedly have a lot of other priority projects. The unfortunate thing here is that just because you have other priority projects doesn't mean you can't put a down payment down on future projects, creating the kind of certainty that will drive future value and development, which can be a great way to more than repay that down payment you made. Of course, part of why today's projects are so expensive is because the land use and transportation planners of yesterday had the same attitude we have today. We don't need to worry about that corridor because we're focusing in other areas. Parties vying for government in Ontario are already talking about higher frequency services on the Milton rail line through Mississauga, of which OBRY is a branch. Basically, in 10 years, we could see frequent service on the main line from which OBRY branches, and if we had kept OBRY, we could have made it a high-frequency branch that would serve even more of Peel for incredibly low costs. But the small cost savings today and the small amount of money that will be generated selling parcels of land have blinded us to the massive waste we're making in the future. We're still in a decade or two when we inevitably realize we do need more transit capacity in places like Peel region. We'll probably decide that we have to go for some sort of tunnel, which will cost more and take way longer to build than just reactivating a rail corridor that we left in stasis, knowing that we would need more transit in the future. Much like it feels like our leaders aren't considering the escalating cost of transit projects, and when I say escalating, I mean like doubling or tripling or quadrupling in price, it also doesn't feel like our leaders are paying any attention and don't have their ears to the ground with the fact that NIMBYism around linear infrastructure corridors, think electrical lines that carry renewable power, or new transit lines, even subway lines traveling under people's homes where it will have literally no noticeable impact on them, has become incredibly difficult. If you think it's hard to re-establish a line that's been laying dormant for 10 years or so, imagine punching a new line through an established neighborhood. It's incredibly foolish that we're not having more foresight to this. And so that's it. We should be forward thinking with our transit and infrastructure, but instead, we're making yesterday's mistakes today. Thanks for watching.